What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Courage to Sell. I'm your host, Jeff Burlingame, joined as always by my co-host, Joe Marcoux. And today we have a very special guest, somebody we had the pleasure of working with at a seminar recently, like fairly recently, down in Nashville, Tennessee, which was awesome. Great experience all around. And we're really excited to talk to this guy today because we believe he's got a lot to offer everybody that's listening. So I want to welcome here Tim Arnold. Tim, how are we doing today, man?
Fantastic. Good to see you again since our Nashville experience, and great to be introduced to your community. This is going to be fun.
Tim, it's a pleasure to have you. You know, one of the things that it's an honor to be able to share the stage with someone who's such a fantastic speaker.
Oh, yeah.
And so for those of you that want to know a little bit more about Tim, I'll tell you right now, it's serendipitous that we speak with him today because yesterday, as we record this, was the official launch of Tim's new book, Next Level Teamwork. And we all know teamwork makes the dream work. Tim, tell us a little bit about your book before we jump in.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, book launch day is such a mix of emotions because it's a busy day and you're just trying to get everything done. But, it's one of those days where you have to keep telling yourself, just enjoy the experience because you're connecting with partners and clients from around the world and you're seeing really cool stuff happen. So I'm just coming down from that now and so pumped to talk to you. But this is, my work for years, for decades now, has been focused on helping professionals, kind of like your audience, go beyond kind of simple problem solving where you just pick a side and walk away and it's done. Now, there's certainly lots of situations in our life and in our businesses where we can just solve problems. But the more we try to be trailblazers, the more we tackle the hard stuff, the less we're dealing with simple problems to solve, and the more we find ourselves wrestling with complexity. I refer to them as tensions to manage, situations where you don't want to pick one side. You just got to get comfortable holding kind of two values in tension. It's almost like breathing. 20,000 times a day, our body inhales and exhales, but it's a package deal. If you inhale and hold it, you're blue in the face. You don't want a pendulum swing because the opposite's not the answer. You've got to learn to hold those values. And as you all know, there's tons of tensions that leaders have to navigate every day. How do I, on one hand, embrace change and innovation, at the same time, hold on to what works, preserve stability? How do I communicate in a way that's candid and truthful and direct, and at the same time relational and tactful?
I love it.
Even all of us manage every day. How do I have a thriving business and a thriving home life? These are not situations where you want to pick sides. You instead, like breathing, got to get comfortable with the tension. So the book I launched yesterday was called Next Level Teamwork, and it just focused on 5 key tensions that were critical if you really want to tap into the collaborative potential of your team, whether that's a team of 2 or 200.
Yeah, and that's huge because
I love it.
Everybody that's listening to this right now is either going to be in the solopreneurship, that might be in a partnership of sorts, but they're looking at potentially starting out very small teams, right? We're talking entrepreneurs in their first 5 years of business, and then going beyond that. So it might be them. It might be like one person that's helping out. It might be a smattering of part-timers, right? And I know for myself personally, like that's where I've been. I ran a CrossFit gym for 6 years. And during that time, I had everything from like 18 super part-timers to eventually like 2 all-in full-timers. They eventually bought the gym from me, which was an awesome experience. But like developing those people and then, like you said, managing those tensions, it was an everyday thing. I remember just walking into the gym and like walking on eggshells if I had that one staff member that was going to be a problem. And I was like every single day just grinding my teeth, like, let's go, gotta figure out how to run my business today with this person. So I think it's really interesting. And we all eventually encounter this. Like, even if you're listening to this right now and you're like, well, I'm the only person that can do what I do. I'm the only person that can coach the way I coach. What you're doing is you're restricting your opportunity to scale, right? Like all of us at some point in time, if we want to live the life that we deserve to live, at some point you've got to scale, because you can't take vacations, you can't take time off, you can't even take weekends off sometimes if it's just you. So where Tim comes in, and what we got the pleasure of experiencing in Nashville as well, was this camaraderie, teamwork, leadership development. And some of the exercises that you ran those 2 days I thought were phenomenal. by the way. And like, I'm sure there's tons of great information in this book as well. This is just something like people need to listen to you, because they do have to expect at some point in time evolving their business to the point of having those teams. Like, team is part of the process. It's something you got to do.
It is. And, I remember when I went from a solopreneur to starting to grow, I hired one and then two, and then we were a small group of five. All of a sudden you realize when you look at the numbers, this is the biggest investment I'm making year after year.
Yeah.
And sadly, so many organizations, whether they're a team of two or again, 20, they settle for mediocrity. They settle for just getting by. And what's interesting is teamwork actually means that 1 + 1 equals at least 3.
Yeah.
And and I dug into the research pretty heavily last year. The majority of organizations, the majority of small businesses, 1 + 1 sometimes doesn't even equal 2, because we've got drama and dysfunction. We have lack of alignment.
Kidding.
So you look at this single most significant investment you're making every year, and you got to stand back and say, am I getting the best return possible? Now, I'll tell you this. I've worked with teams all over the world, from small high-tech startups to the United Nations weapons inspectors.
Wow.
No one's figured it out. I've yet to work with a team where everything's working perfectly. That's just not real. It's always a work in progress. But what you have to do is stand back and say, when it comes to collaboration, when it comes to alignment, when it comes to actually feeling like we're getting the best from each other, both from the challenging to cheerleading, are we going in the right direction? Can I feel, when I look at the last quarter, was it the strongest our team has been? And, often the answer is not encouraging. So although there's no magic formulas, there's no kind of simple solutions, there are practical ongoing things that we can do as leaders to maximize the collaborative potential of our team.
I'm curious for you, Tim, because again, you're a leadership expert, and there's a lot of things get thrown out in the world of sales where sales managers or CEOs of companies, they want their sales team to be leaders themselves. What's your take on that? Like, can you describe to us and the listener what your take as a leadership expert would mean if a salesperson needs to become a leader themselves?
Yeah, and it's interesting because leadership is one of those words that can mean a million different things. I think leadership, at the end of the day, means that you're moving something forward. You're trailblazing in a way that wouldn't happen if you weren't moving it forward. That's leading. Often you're helping people come along with you, not all the time. The other thing that both of you know is leadership means responsibility. So at the end of the day, the more leadership you have, the more it comes down to you. So a lot of sales professionals, whether they're leading people or not, are in fact leading and being empowered to lead. What's really interesting in sales teams, I find, one of the tensions in next level teamwork I talk about is, if you really want to maximize the collaborative, you've got to look at both embracing independent work and collaborative work, meaning that, we need to kind of put our head down, do it well, give the freedom to kind of just let me go. But at the end of the day, we also want to kind of tap into the collaborative, working off each other, sharing ideas, encouraging each other, challenging each other. And I find in sales teams, there's no model for, okay, just do this and it works. It depends on the organization you're in. I work with some teams that are more like a hockey team, where the team members have to be passing back and forth and changing and kind of, well, there's sales teams. I feel like it's almost more like a competitive gymnast team, in that everyone in the team's working to let your country or the company win, but independently, you want to win too. And you actually are going for the gold, sometimes against each other. And that's okay. So it's going to probably have more of an independent leadership focus, but that's not an excuse to minimize the collaboration that can come from that team being a team. So you got to say, okay, what would it look like for us to, again, empower each of us to be independent leaders? But that's not an excuse for not tapping into the collaborative potential. And that may mean that we just are super deliberate and diligent of connecting X amount of times a month. We get together so many times per year. But you just don't want to lose out on that, because we also are independent leaders.
You crush something there repeatedly, and I think it means so much, and that's collaborative potential. I know that I've seen this before where you have a sales manager who comes into a position where they end up eating their young, whether it's because they want to get the gold, as you mentioned, it could be ego. It could be that, hey, you know what? I get a super bonus or some kind of bonus commission. And so instead of leading their team and helping them create leaders, they end up literally taking over, and it becomes a sales fiasco. Have you ever encountered that? And what would you say was the best solution to that problem?
Yeah, I think the one thing is to actually approach that not as a problem where either you are going to have people who are empowered to just win independently, or we're holding hands and singing kumbaya and one happy family. Like, no, none of those situations are going to work in that scenario. What I think helps is use tension language. Like, folks, if we're going to maximize individual winning and collaborative, like going forward as an organization, we've got to get comfortable with this tension between independent individual leadership, flexible to do our own things, and making sure that we're not missing out, as we said, on the collaborative. And it's going to be a work in progress. But, again, that analogy of kind of the gymnast team is helpful to say, when it works well, when we can individually win goals and, knock it out of the park, and at the same time, as a company, work together so that we're leading our field, like, that's what we're going for. And again, there's no magical solution, but we want to talk about that tension. I have a CEO I'm working with right now, and he inherited a sales team that are right across the country here in Canada. And, everyone in the team assume we're not a team because we sell in this province or we sell in this province, and you don't know what it's like. And I said, all of that's true. And you're a team. Yeah. And to just, to think that your job is just to schedule individuals to divide and conquer, it'll work. But again, 1 + 1 = 2. But how do you actually allow 1 + 1 to = 3? Or 1 + 1 + 1 to = 10 or 200. Like, that's possible. But that means that we've got to be really diligent in taking time to learn from each other, share best practices, kind of have postmortems when things blow up and don't go well. I'm learning a new technology. Hey, I want to throw this by you because it might be something that works really well in Western Canada or Western US. Like, that doesn't just happen by chance. It happens by choice. But it takes people to, you've got to carve out the time to say, sometimes if we're going to not just divide and conquer, but at the same time, really maximize our collaborative, we've got to just slow down a little bit so we can go way faster down the road. And that's hard to do because at the end of the day, we got lists a mile long we want to get done individually. But it's like, no, we've got to be diligent in having just a little bit of collaborative time in our calendars so we don't miss out on that synergy that comes from actually learning and working and challenging and supporting each other.
Yeah. What's the analogy we always use, Joe? We're changing a tire while driving down the road.
That's it.
It's typically what's going on, right? Like, so in a business, as any business owner knows or finds out rapidly, is that, you're going to have your to-do list that has to get done. You got to deal with your urgent, non-urgent tasks. Everything feels urgent when you're the one in charge and everything you own is on the line, right? But then there's also, it pays sometimes to slow down, to invest time and, or finances into certain aspects of that business, because it'll come back and it'll pay tenfold, right? So absolutely tons of value there. Another thing that you just talked about that I find interesting, because I've seen it so many times over the years, and Joe, I know you've seen this too, because you and I have both worked with tons of sales teams, is that, and Joe, you called it eat your young, but it's that lack of leadership from the top, the sales manager. One of the scenarios that I ran into a lot, and Tim, you tell me if you've been running into this as you start to work with these teams, is from the top, the leadership from the top is like me, right? It's the sales manager first and foremost has to eat, and then the scraps go down to the sales team. And what you end up seeing is a lot of sales team attrition, where they start dropping like flies. It's either they're getting fired because the scraps aren't enough, they're getting the bad leads, right? Like, the sales manager is like, hey, I got to make sure I get my bread. I got a 100K goal. I'm hitting my 100K, and then best of luck to you nerds. And then all these poor team members are just like, help. Like, I just need some help. I need an opportunity to flourish. And I see this That's what I saw with sales teams. Like, so just imagine your typical larger sales team in a corporate business. Now, when I look at smaller entrepreneurs, when I look at small business owners, what I tend to see is like the business owner themselves constantly just stepping in the way, like getting in the way, tripping up their own team, not like with the intention of I'm here to mess up my team, but with the intention of like, it's my business, it's my baby. Like I'm going to step in and make sure stuff gets done the way I like it to get done, and end up just cutting the legs off of their team members. And then their team members fail. And then they look at the team member as a failure, and then they fire the team member. Like, do you see these kinds of like these cycles?
Yeah, I do. I actually, I've got a couple things coming to mind as you're talking. And, I think first of all, before you bring anyone on your sales team, or you even bring the first person on, you've got to spend some time actually with folks like yourselves to come up with a business model that actually is effective, so that you want your new sales individual or team to start actually taking more and more big leads. So if the model is set up so that at the end of the day, I'm just getting rid of a bunch of calls and clients I don't have a lot of time for, well, you'd be better just to have a model that cuts those people out, period, and keep just selling to your top tier. If the goal though is, if I can bring in 1 or 2 or 10 people to really start to scale this, well, then it should allow those folks, their win is your win. So first of all, work on a good model. And that's why people need to lean in like folks like yourself to do that. Then you've got to actually become, one of the chapters in Next Level Teamwork is managing the tension between empowerment and accountability. And we know that empowerment means, it doesn't just mean I'm giving you a list of things I don't have time for. It's that I'm actually empowering you for success. And all of the research that I've been going through would be incredibly clear. If you want people to be fully engaged, if you want people to have a sense of purpose, so they enjoy coming to work or logging in the morning, they've got to be empowered, and they've got to be able to do things in a way that suits kind of their style and their preferences. But empowerment doesn't mean that I do a day or 2 of orientation and you're good to go. There's an analogy that I heard years ago that said, if you're puppy training a dog, trying to get it to, go outside, and you come home from work and there's an accident in the carpet, you should always roll up a newspaper and then smack yourself on the head 3 or 4 times, because it's not the dog's fault. It's your fault. Your job is to give that new employee what they need to thrive.
Yeah.
So empowerment means that you're a team still. And you're actually now, and even if the 3 of us were a team, I guarantee we'd have different learning styles. I learn by action. Joe's going to say, Tim, just give it a try. And obviously there's, barriers in place, so I'm not making mistakes, but that's the best thing that I can do. Well, Jeff may be what's called an imitator, which means I need to see it done well 3 or 4 times. Then I'm good to go. But don't just throw me in. I've got someone I hired last year on my team, and she's an analyzer, which means I need information. She's a person who actually reads instruction manuals for appliances. If I just throw that person in, she's feeling like I'm out of here. Like this is irresponsible. So empowerment doesn't just mean I give you names and say, good luck. It means, how do I partner with you to succeed? Because our model means when you succeed, I succeed.
Yeah.
So it means ongoing check-ins, lots of high fives, some constructive criticism. But when that happens, people feel invested in, and they know that they're supported to win. And then you keep good people.
Yeah. You know what I'm picking up, what you're saying here, Tim, is the leader can come to a meeting with a team. And in this case, we're going to use a sales team, and the leader has a choice. The leader can say, hey, I can't do this. I need somebody in the team to do this. Or the leader can come to the meeting and say, there's an opportunity that I have here. Who wants to be able to take charge on this one?
Mm-hmm.
And framing that gives people the opportunity to raise hands, because, for example, I may not be the person who can speedily take care of a piece of marketing. There could be somebody on the team that could go, oh, I love doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And so you empower them by asking the question, who wants to be able to take charge on this? And then, of course, turning around and saying, okay, so then what are the deadlines on this? How can I help you finish this through?
Well, I think
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Joe. Jeff.
I was gonna say, like, it's abdication versus delegation for me, because I know all of us have probably had a manager, had a leader, had a superior at some point in time who's done this to us, where they're like, like Joe is saying, that's the framing of it, but then there's still the doing of it. So the framing could have been, and I've had it before, like, who wants to, have this amazing opportunity? And I say, me, like, sure, 100%, I'll take it. And they're like, cool. And they hand me a stack of papers and they're like, see you later. Take care of those leads.
Right. Yeah.
And there's no actual delegation. That is the definition of abdication. I don't want to do it. You do it. And then you have to go and figure it out like a chicken with your head cut off, running around like crazy. So I'm looking more at this as the delegation versus abdication, where we need more of these leaders to not only empower, not only give opportunity, but then give, like you said, everything that person needs to be successful. Otherwise,
based on their style.
You're not, based on their style. Otherwise, you're not being a leader. You're just handing stuff off you don't want to do, which both.
Yeah, and there's a huge difference. I like the abdication comment. I also feel, if you really are doing your best to get people that you believe in and think have huge potential, at any season, you're thinking, what would be the next stretch for Jeff? What would that look like? And when that comes into my inbox, or that's, an opportunity that comes my way, I agree with you. I'm going to you and saying, I feel like you've got this, but are you there? Because the last thing I want to do is throw something at you, and I want to serve the client well. But I just had this with one of my team members in the past season, and she was like, I feel like I can deliver on this, and this will be a stretch. So I need to know this is actually going to be just as much work for me right now. But next year, she's going to run with these all the time. So you need to know going in, it's actually going to be as much work on the coaching, as much work on the debriefing, as much work on the checking in with the client, because the client needs to know I'm on this too. But if that works well, then next year, those clients are served brilliantly by that person, and I can keep focusing on the next big challenge. So there is something to say, again, if you want to scale your team, and if your goal is to actually scale, you've got to be super strategic on how am I empowering and developing and investing in these folks to succeed.
So Tim, we're getting, I think we're already over our typical 20-minute time span.
I told you we never hit the time.
We never hit it. That's all right, because there's a lot of compelling information in this, conversation with you. So as a speaker, because for those of you who don't know, you can hire Tim to come and speak to your team, to your organization. I'm sure, Tim, you do it both live and on virtual. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in that and what it took for you to sell yourself.
That's a great question. I got started. You probably don't know this. I'm an accountant by training, and realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to be my profession. Did a lot of outdoor adventure guiding, mainly with corporations. So team building, paddling and high ropes courses and things like that. And would have been in front of groups for the first time in that setting and loved it. Just went, this is life-giving for me. So that kind of set my career path. And I, when I started to feel like I was going to go beyond facilitating outdoor adventures and start doing training and speaking, two things I think were key was, one, focusing on what is my piece, like what element of content or expertise do I actually feel not only lights me up, but really makes a difference. And for me, it's that whole healthy tension approach. Then focusing on that. And, once I kind of threw my hat in the ring of, I really want to do more speaking, I was speaking at every event that would have me, many of which weren't paid, a lot of which were stipend based, local community groups, chambers of commerce, you name it, just building that muscle, because speaking is very different than just having a great conversation with a friend or owning a room in a meeting. So I was out there, and again, the whole time you're getting testimonials, you're getting video clips, until it finally was at a place where I felt like it was, something that I could prominently say, this is actually what I do. Started to talk to agencies and have representation. But again, that was years later. It was just slowly and consistently refining my craft and just building those strengths and getting tons of feedback and, having confidence, but also humility to keep evolving and learning.
Thank you, by the way, for the whole thing about evolving and learning. And, you had recommended for me to listen to a podcast, and I've actually sent off an email to Martin and Farah. Martin was a guest on Michael Port's podcast, and he's got the Speakers Bureau, Speaker Spotlight, and fantastic. So I'm fingers crossed. I actually mentioned you in my email. I just sent it off this morning. So,
great.
Yeah. So thanks for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'd love to team up.
Yeah, it would be great. So there's a thing that every episode of the Courage to Sell podcast that we go into, and every one of us that has been in sales one way or another, we've had to experience this. At the time, it could be embarrassing. Now we can look back and we can maybe laugh about it. Typically we do.
Hopefully.
And it's called sales fails. So Tim, what's an example of a story that you could tell us and the listeners about a time where you went into a sales conversation or a buying conversation with the intention to sell, and it just blew up? We've all had it.
It's funny. That's a fantastic question. This is going to take me way back. I don't know if I even would have been 30, so probably upper 20s. And the business was slowly but surely growing. And I got a call from a Fortune 100 company in the US to come down and pitch an event with 3,000 people. So it was a massive Vegas convention.
Nice.
Well, at that point, our biggest program ever was under 1,000. So that was a stretch. And I just, in my head at whatever upper 20s, thought, well, this is a done deal. Like we've got this, and pitched this generally Habitat for Humanity. We're going to build a house approach. Invested heavily, got a flight, flew down to Vegas, had this kind of pitch meeting. And I talk a lot about confidence and humility. I think I probably needed a bit more humility at the time, because I almost was like pitching the client, which was this huge panel. And my heart started beating thinking, I don't know if we can do this. And anyways, it didn't work. And it was also a great lesson for me later to talk to my team and encourage them to kick me in the butt more, because I came back and we didn't get the job. And my now operations director said at the time, thank God I didn't think that would work. I'm like, why didn't you tell me? I'm
wow.
to pitch this. And she's like, well, you were so excited and you were so confident. And I'm like, no. I don't need you to be my cheerleader. I need you to be my challenger.
Yeah.
But I get really excited about ideas, and I have about 100 of them a day. And I'm confident in all of them equally, but only about 2 or 3 are actually good. So what I've learned is, before I get in front of someone, I need to vet that idea by a few people who are going to, encourage me, but challenge me, because I've done a few pitches that, a month later, a week later, you're like, ooh, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Oh, I love that, because
that's great.
I think we all need that challenger in our corner.
Big time.
Everybody needs
Jeff
that.
And I.
Me and Joe do it. That's
oh yeah, big time
together, because he'll naysay me and I'll naysay him, like all day, every day. We're not afraid to do it
with respect. That's the key.
Yeah.
It's like, I can respect your opinion. I don't have to agree with it. So how are we going to work this? And how do we make this idea make sense? Because sometimes it's peeling away the layers, no different than a discovery process or overcoming an objection. Sometimes the other person doesn't realize that, hey, you know what? I didn't look at it from that perspective.
Right.
Oh my God.
And you need someone who's is committed to you and the higher purpose and the business thriving. But, attention that I have to manage in our small team is optimism and realism, because I'm off the chart optimism, and I'm not looking for a pessimist. I just need a realist to say, Tim,
you're pointing at me, Jeff.
But not now, or let's look at it differently. And sometimes I'll need to hear that 3 or 4 times before I start to go, oh, because that's just my blind spot. It's not that I don't want to be grounded, and I want to pitch great stuff. I just need a real good push to check that blind spot.
I think this is a great place to end our episode. I think that, I keep hearing about tension, and I think to the listener, we're going to make sure that we get a link in the description so that you can pick up Tim's new book. You absolutely have to do that. Tim, where can people find out more about you and about what you do, so that they can get in touch with you, follow you, learn more about the great content that you offer?
Thank you so much. So the easiest way is just go to Tim, Arnold, ARNOLD.ca. So I'm in Canada, so that's .ca. So you can find out about my books and my speaking and our workshops there. I seem to hang out most on LinkedIn and Instagram, and that's just Tim Arnold Leadership. So I'd love to connect with people there as well.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate your time, Tim. Thank you so much for hopping on the show, and we look forward to catching up with you soon. Maybe sharing a stage again soon. I don't know.
I'd love that. Let's make
That
it
would be
happen.
great.
I love it. All right. Thank you to everybody for listening to this episode. We'll be back next week with another one and another special guest. All right. Chaz, take us out.